right, hi everybody, and welcome back to the Archer Report. I'm your host, Steel Archer. It's really good to see you all today. Thanks for everyone for subscribing up to the new channel. I know I keep dragging everybody across channels all the time, and it gets super annoying. But thanks to everybody who's come over and joined us on this experience. This is going to be a fun episode. Lev and Jules have come to join us. So we've got Lev here right now, and Jules may or may not be coming in soon, but we'll have to see. And Jules, it's really, really good to see you because, you guys have been doing fantastic. You guys know how to use the internet. I'm like one of these old boomers who doesn't even know how to do anything, but you guys are doing really, really fantastic. You're using Zoom chats, and you've got all these debates, and you've got all these people and a Discord. I mean, you guys are really hitting it off, and I have to sit down and take notes, vigorously with a pen or something and learn a lot. But you guys are doing really fantastic. So firstly, how are you, mate, and how you been?
I am great. I just did some yoga today, which I have not done for a very long time because I've been doing these streams for so long. I did Yoga X, which is part of P90X, which is something Jules highly recommended for me to do, and it's great. Like, I feel great afterwards. I did it for about like an hour. I did half of it. Like, then there's also the balancing postures and the stretching postures, but this was enough because right now I am just very, very happy. I'm happy with the way things are going right now. I am happy with my life, with my health, and I just want to spread as much positivity as I can. And I know that could also be annoying for some people when there is this much enthusiasm. It's like, why aren't you broken yet? Why didn't the system break you down? What's going on? This is not right. This is not right.
Absolutely. And just to inform us, what have you been up to on your channel? Let's talk about your channel, Lev and Jules channel. I mean, you've had lots of debates, and every time I've checked it out, it's always been very deep, very philosophical. Lots of talks on contemporary politics, contemporary philosophy, art and culture, music, all sorts of things. Tell us some of the highlights and what you guys have been up to over there.
So we've been doing the podcast itself for about 2 years now. We had about 300 subscribers, which is not a lot. But then this May, I decided to do live streams. I have no idea why I didn't decide to do live streams from the beginning. That would have been the move. But nonetheless, I did the live streams. Hey, Info Warlock, how are you? Info Warlock is joining us in the chat. Great of you to be here. So anyway, around May, I decided to do the live streams, and all of a sudden, our numbers just shot up like that because we were meeting all kinds of very interesting people on Twitter, a lot of these amazing esoteric Twitter communities that might as well be completely different planets from the people at the, let's say, the National Arts Club or other circles of New York City high society that I also run with. At least right now I'm not because of the coronavirus, but before I still am the chair of the Art and Technology Committee at the National Arts Club in Gramercy Park, and I attended a lot of those events, a lot of those parties, and I heard the conversations that were taking place there, and many of them did feel like you were watching Stephen Colbert, rarely like you were watching Bill Maher, although that did also happen if you got drunk enough, with the people there. But generally, it was kept within that zone. But the people who I'm finding out online, the conversations, they get very deep and very exciting and very spicy too. Like there's a lot of controversial things that are talked about there. It's like whatever you can imagine, there's no limits, and that's great. Like we are at a time right now which I feel is kind of like I don't know if it's end times, I don't know if the apocalypse is here, but there are a lot of things coming to a head. We're all connected like we've never been before, at least. I don't know what happened with the ancient civilizations. Like, I believe that the Atlanteans had their own psychic internet. Now we have like a ones with ones and zeros, a digital one. But anyway, the point is that we have never been disconnected at least several millenniums. So this means that something's coming to a head with all this connectedness, and it may result in some kind of a very interesting end game that would conclude whatever it is we're currently going through. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or not.
Well, that's a really interesting idea, and obviously we wanted to set up the Arch Report and detonation. A lot of this revolves around the debt cycle. A lot of the internet connectedness you see is all to do with the debt cycle and the gross amount of debt that there is, because a lot of the prosperity, this is, I set up the show for a reason called Detonation, because a lot of the prosperity that you've seen in your lifetime, that I've seen in my lifetime, that a lot of countries have experienced, has been pulled out of the future. And the thing is, with some of these countries that we're seeing them starting to catch up with the debt cycle. So the prosperity is starting to run out. The future, the past is catching up with the future and the present. Something's funny, but
I'm sorry, it's the chat. Oh, God damn it. Okay, I got it out of my system. I got it out of my system. Please keep going. Please keep
what
going.
happened?
Okay.
Oh, there's a chat here. Reminder: if Lev laughs, you drink. If he leaves the shot, you finish the drink.
Okay, please keep going. My apologies.
Yeah. Well, then, yeah.
The...
I've got a lot more to say on what you're talking about with the end times. I think this is a big transitional phase in human history. And it's going to be very interesting. I'm excited to see what happens. Of course, we've got a lot of ideas, but what do you see? What do you think? What do you see? I want to know what you guys think in terms of the super cycle that's ending and the super cycle that we're heading into, and an experience in this transition. What do you see? I mean, what is it that you feel? I mean, you feel like it's the apocalypse. It's definitely not the apocalypse.
Well, what does the apocalypse mean? Apocalypse just means revelation. It means something that's being revealed. And with the internet, we could just go to all kinds of different websites, download all kinds of different books, both ancient and modern, and start to piece certain things together. Things about where we come from originally. I mean, even though I subscribe to the idea of natural selection, I believe that there is a lot more going on behind the scenes than we realize. I see ourselves as light beings, as stars. If you even just take the human body and go into like the Vitruvian, or whatever that's called, the Vitruvian man position with the arms up, that would be a position of a 5-pointed star. Never mind the penis, which is a lot smaller, so it barely counts. And I think there's a lesson there. If you take Shiva and Shakti, Shiva being the Hindu god, one of the trio of Shiva, Brahma, and Vishnu, and it's supposed to be like the god of destruction, but it's also supposed to represent just like this state of non-being, which is kind of like destruction, right? Like if you destroy something, then it ceases to be, like the parrot from Monty Python. Anyway, you have Shiva, which is a triangle like this, and then you have Shakti, which is the energy that animates the universe. Some people call it Kundalini. It's basically responsible for what Heraclitus referred to as the fire, which everything is composed of, the reason why you can never step into the same river twice. So you have Shakti and you have Shiva, and the two of them are supposed to meet together, and that's like the balance of heaven and earth. And the cycle that I think we're in right now, and I've gotten a little bit off topic, I know, with the Shiva and Shakti, I'm just kind of winging it right now. The cycle that we're in right now, I think, is one where there are people who are going to be able to find balance between these two extremes, and to be able to withstand whichever way the winds are going to be, whichever way the winds are going to be blowing. And this is an alchemical process that I think everybody is capable of doing if they are curious enough and if they devote enough time to it. Not to be able to be swayed to be part of, like, I don't know, the angry mobs that are going around looting, for example. Being able to save your family, your community, just doing something to maintain a sense of balance in this time. And the revelation that I'm talking about, I think it's also going to involve people who are dedicated to this, finding out, what could I do in terms of knowledge that's been passed down years and years and years, as far as having a good home. Like I was having a great conversation last Sunday while we were talking about a lot of spiritual matters. We were talking about Kundalini, all this esoteric sexual energy. And it brought up a conversation about real estate, because I want to move upstate. I want to move somewhere in the Catskill Mountains, where I have my own house that's big, that's made of lumber, that's going to last a long time, that's going to be well insulated. And that is my way of finding balance, where I want to do the show. I'm also an animator. I want to make animated movies, but I also want to raise a family. I want to pass on the things that my family taught me to the next generation, so they'll be able to maintain the balance, be the center of the center of the cyclone, while everything else is spinning around. And that spinning, that's also nature. Whatever's taking place right now, it's all nature, man. Like, it's all spinning, and it's all chaotic, and it's getting faster and faster and faster. Right now, I think the job of people who are going to be responsible, just like I think the people back in the Atlantean days were, is to maintain that balance and be the adults in the room. And that is what I'm trying to do.
So do you live? You're talking about here. So obviously, there's a great amount of global stress. It's kind of like this Christian revelation. You mentioned the word revelation, and there's a famous book in the Bible at the end of the Bible called Revelation. And there's sayings like there's prophecies. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. Mother and father against each other, and all this sorts of horrific end times talk. And if you feel that sort of stress, and you're translating this stress into a spiritual, esoteric spiritual notion of positivism, I'm wondering if this is a common theme in the people that you talk to, the generation that you're in. Are people turning to esoteric religious type convictions to suppress anxiety, or is there something else going on? Are they not doing that, and they turning to modern warfare and COD and video games and pornography or something like that? Are you the norm, or are you outside of the norm in this relationship with your view, a spiritual esoteric view of dealing with anxiety and stress at this time?
Okay, to answer your question first, let me ask you, do you know what a goon cave is?
Goon cave?
Yes.
It sounds like an Australian a wine box cave.
No, okay. A goon cave is a setup that very horny individuals would have for the sake of pleasuring themselves, where they have multiple monitors set up of the most extreme pornography you could ever set your eyes on. And what they do is they just gather via the internet in a group and conduct their little ritual. And this is what they've done with the gifts of all these ones and zeros, with standing on the shoulders of giants, with people having to forego meals in order to build all this infrastructure that we're on the top of. This is how they choose to spend their time doing what they choose to spend their time doing. Now, other people are going to spend their time playing video games, playing Candy Crush. Like, I saw a lot of people play Candy Crush Saga on the subway while feeding potato chips to their, 3-year-old kid. So I think for the most part, people are going to be enwrapped in whatever cycle is going to be taking place. And my hope is that the people who I met online who are not millennials, personally, I think most millennials are going to be screwed over just based on the way that we were raised. I think that they didn't have enough of a visualization of what kind of propaganda is being spread when you're very young. And as a result, they tend to look at the world in such a way as to have no problem canceling somebody, censoring somebody if they say the wrong thing, and not enough curiosity into things that have happened in the past and what we can learn from the past. So I don't have a lot of faith in millennials. I'm sure that there are many great millennials. I don't know if you're a millennial. You're a great millennial. If you are a millennial, I believe you are one. So I have much more faith in the Zoomers and in the generations that are going to come after. At the same time, I also have little faith in most Zoomers and in most millennials and everybody. And I wish the best for everybody. But just generally speaking, you're not going to have enough time to spread information to enough people to be able to have everybody get on the same program. So the best you can do is just spread positivity and encourage people, just to be the best that they can be and hope for the best in that sense, while talking with people and empowering those who, like Jesus Christ said, those who have ears shall hear. And there's not going to be that many of them, but whatever, it is what it is.
It's interesting you mentioned a goon cave, because this is something that's embedded into the absolute psychology of who we are, and there are different theories about how consciousness has emerged within human civilization and the human being himself, herself. How did consciousness actually emerge? And there's different theories. Obviously, climate change is obviously a big part of that. Destruction of a natural habitat, and the species forced to move out and adapt to different scenarios, and enlarge brain capacity, from being a mammal. But there is a theory, and this mushroom theory, this theory about the fact that about 20,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, when the last time the ice caps started to melt, the environment started to dramatically change in the North Africa, in the savannah. Started to change from an absolute sort of rainforesty area to a more savanna type area, and the proliferation of different types of mushrooms fell about the place, right? And a lot of these mushrooms, are toxic, but some of these mushrooms are more like magic mushrooms, hallucinogens, right? And there has been many bones found of these hunter-gatherer peoples who are buried in caves. You've got the oldest one about 60,000, 80,000 years ago, Adam and Eve, buried in caves and stuff. But we're talking only about 20,000 years ago. So getting close to the point of absolute consciousness. We're getting very close to the point of absolute consciousness now. This is the very blurry edge of when consciousness really starts to emerge, and we know that these type creatures, these pre-humanoid creatures, were most probably ingesting these magic mushrooms at this time. And one of the theories is that that ruinous orgies were absolutely part of the creation of human consciousness in the cave. And I just thought it was cool that you mentioned that we're reverting at a time of great stress, which is the same thing. It was climactic stress. All the animals on the borders. People are just starting to kick into consciousness, where you're starting to get hunter-gatherer peoples bleeding into other hunter-gatherer territories. We're still a little bit early, still 20,000 years ago. Really, that sort of sophistication really starts happening around the 12,000 years ago mark. But you have evidence of these sorts of sophisticated, pre-sophisticated tribal conditions, and orgies absolutely being an absolute part of that in the cave. So, but that's at very low doses. At higher doses, obviously, then you start to get religion. You start to see God, and this is where they think that some sort of consciousness was absolutely accelerated in this thing. And you said something else interesting I want to talk about quickly. I just finished a book, Fahrenheit 5851 or 581. Very, very good book. I recommend you read it, but it's a dystopian novel about information transfer. And, you said quite blasely, we just go back in time and we read these ancient books and all this sort of stuff. And in this book, actually, the hero of the book, he's what they call a fireman, right? And in the context, if I say a fireman right now, most people think of the guy who comes to save your house from burning down, or a building or a structure or a plantation or something, save it from burning down. But in this book, a fireman is actually someone who they have the same thing as a normal fireman nowadays. The bell rings, they race off and everything, but they actually burn books, they burn ancient knowledge, they destroy knowledge. They don't have the internet, because the internet and knowledge and philosophy and sex and orgy and thinking is actually deemed unhappy in this society. And so they burn them, and they ban all the books. It's kind of like 1984, but there is a sort of a degree of freedom, and the freedom that's offered is kind of like the society that you see around you that's not on the internet. And what is that? That's That's movies. That's, that's Dumb and Dumber type movies. That's pornography. That's
Woke culture.
dumb politics. That's talk show hosts who, and the news. And that's it. And this is what this dystopian society has for you. And if you get caught with Plato or Aristotle, if you get caught reading the treatise, if you get caught reading Adam Smith, you face jail time. And also these firemen will come and they will burn your house down because all the houses in this time are basically fireproof buildings. So there's no need for actual firemen. But these people are on call and they will respond to the thought. It's kind of like 1984, but instead of being an Orwellian 1984 where you get tortured and everything is in the now, everything is in the present, and if the party says, holding up four fingers, and the party says there's 5, you say, all right, it's 5. If we don't know if it's East Asia or Oceania or who they're at war with, and if the party says we're automatically at war with someone else, we are at someone else. This is not like this at all. This is a modern dystopian society where people have a degree of freedom, but if they exercise actual freedom of information and knowledge, they're suppressed, they're tortured, their stuff's burned, and they're thrown in prison. It's very interesting. You see that, and you can kind of feel that. You're in America right now, and you've seen this in Russia. When the history starts to disappear, good or bad, whatever, it's history, right? And as the statues start to fall, as the history starts to go, as the books start to be burned, that's information, good or bad, is actually very precious. It's a very precious resource to know good and bad parts of history, because you can't just know all the good stuff and you can't just know all the bad stuff. We have to know both sides of the story in order to actually advance as a civilization. And I find this book burning sort of world that we're in quite disturbing. What do you think?
So first, let me touch on the first point that you mentioned, which resurrected the memory of the man as a star point that I was talking about earlier before the Shiva Shakti stuff just made me completely forget about what I was trying to say there. What I was trying to say by man as star is that I don't agree with the idea that it was drugs that induced our evolution. I don't believe in evolution. I believe in natural selection. I believe that we adapt to whatever environment we happen to be in, but there's always a level of willpower that we can either exercise or decide not to exercise, in which case I think it's much easier to sit down than it is to stand, and it's much easier to lay down than it is to sit. And following that thought, I could see that it's much more easier to go down than go up. And that's why the pressures that have been throughout our, modern life have been there, and, pre-modern life as well, of course. Like with farming, think of the amount of things that you need to be aware of at all times to do that. But anyway, the point is that we're always fighting against something, either intellectually or physically. And if we're not fighting against anything at all, or if we're just fighting against something that's physical, then I think we're going to go down a notch. But if we're fighting in such a way that we have to use both our brains and our brawn, that is something that enables us to reach higher levels and then eventually get to the form that I think we originated from, which is oneness, universal oneness, yada, yada, yada. But what I mean by oneness, I see it more as what Rudolf Steiner talked about, where the original primordial forms of a human being, like you have this idea of nadis and chakras and all these things, it's like a less physical layer that still has the same human-like framework as an experiencer of reality. So if you were to pick a form, let's say you wanted to pick a form in which you can interact with whatever world you happen to be in. I think this human form's pretty good for that. But this human form in particular has problems because we're weak, we're frail. If somebody throws us off a building, we're going to die. But if there was a primordial human form that still encompassed a lot of the similar things that we see whenever we look in the mirror, then I think that's the kind of form that would be a primordial form of an architecture for the entire universe, experiencing itself. So it would start from there, and then I think over time it would get more and more and more solidified. And I'm not talking about hundreds of thousands of years. I'm talking about hundreds of millions of years, or however long it lasts. In the Bhagavad Gita, they talked about how human beings were millions of years old. I tend to lean that that is a possibility, that a lot of the ways that we interpret how things have gone on is from a limited amount of information that we have about what it actually means to be not even a human being. I'm not even talking about Earth. I'm talking about what it means to be an embodied individual that is able to converse with everything that's going on around them. That I see as the primordialness. But to your point about the mushrooms, I think that they are a technology that does some kind of a trade-off with us. Mushrooms, they want there to be more mushrooms, so they want more people to consume those mushrooms for more mushrooms to be to be in the world. So I think the trade-off though is when you take a mushroom or LSD or DMT or any of these psychotropic substances, you are not exercising your own willpower in order to get to that state, much like I think your primordial ancestors would have been able to do. So as a result, what the trade-off is, I don't particularly know, but I think that it's like a crutch. It's like something that you take and then experience all these beautiful, blissful things, and then there may be something that you're going to have to pay, some kind of toll that you're going to have to pay at the end for getting that knowledge prematurely. And I guess it depends on the degree of knowledge that you get. If you do it at a party, maybe karmically you're going to be offset by something else. But whenever something comes too easily without you exerting your own willpower, like I believe that we have the power to change reality based on our thoughts. We are our thoughts. Everything is a thought. So in that sense, if we're using something artificially to gain certain information that we haven't willed ourselves to get otherwise, I think there's going to be a trade-off there. That's just on your point about the stoned ape theory.
Yeah, absolutely. Stoned ape theory, that's the one. And what do you think about the dystopia that we live in with the book burning, the statues coming down? You've seen this before in Russia. You've seen this before all over Europe. Every time a new power takes place, they always destroy the past, and then that prevents knowledge transfer over the generations that we don't learn from the good or bad things. What do you think?
I think that it's just part of this cycle that we've been talking about before. Absolutely, it happened in the Soviet Union, it happened in communist China, and as far as whether it's going to happen again or not, a lot of these revolutions have been fueled, like Moldbug talks about how World War II and the gang fights that were occurring before that were fueled by the rage of these World War I veterans. Now, today, we don't particularly have that same kind of rage in these Antifa people. We have a lot of drugged up individuals who just want to create all this chaos. But you saw what happened with Chaz. It didn't take a lot. It just took one order for them to just clear everybody out. So that was honestly on the government of Seattle that allowed this horrible thing to take place, where you had 2 deaths. That's blood on their own hands for not stepping in earlier. But the reason why I'm mentioning this is that this opposition, I think the biggest opposition is going to be laziness. It's going to be Americans that are hopped up on oxycodone and other drugs. Like, I used to smoke weed. My favorite thing to do was to smoke, not even smoke, but vaporize weed. I had this beautiful bong. I used to vaporize some weed, then go to the gym. I loved it. I loved lifting weights while high, but I realized that that is a crutch. And other people, they don't even lift weights while high. They just sit around watching Rick and Morty and eating breakfast cereal. So this is why I see this being something that's going to degrade people into a state of constantly needing more stimulation and feeling deprived when they're not getting that stimulation, and when they're not generating that stimulation through using their own mind, through reading, or just through thinking. Like, what's better than that? What is better than coming up with a story in your head, making new characters? Like, that's what I used to do when I was a child so much. Like, right before I went to sleep, I used to just compose stories based on my acting teacher, Marcel. I went to Lee Strasberg Theater Institute. And I think Lady Gaga also attended that, but that's a different story. Anyway, when I made all these fantasies in my head, it did feel in a way like I was exercising my muscle, but I was also having fun. If we have external stimuli that does it for us, I think that that is a really bad precedent to set. which is why for all those kids who were, like I'm sure you were, I think we grew up at around the same time, who had to go outside and were bored and had to come up with something to do. That is a great exercise. That is something that I think is going to eventually win the day, because there are going to be so many people, including the quote unquote elites or whatever you want to call them, the people who would be in charge, like there's that old quote, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. I think we're going to have a lot of one-eyed people. And I think that those one-eyed people are not going to have the willpower to be able to change reality in their image. But I think the people who are curious enough to do so will have the ability to change reality in their image.
Wow, that's some pretty profound thoughts there, Lev, and I thank you for those thoughts. I really appreciate that. It's a very interesting thought, and I agree. I mean, I find my own imagination quite vivid, quite deep, and I can get lost in there. And I had someone ask me, what type of music do you like? And I went, oh, a lot of it you wouldn't know, and because it's in my own head. I mean, I make it up. And they said, "What's the fun of that?" Because it's I don't know, because I can always generate my own music before I have to externalize to somebody else's imagination. And the only difference between what they can do and what I can do is they know how to externalize it because they've been trained or whatever, and that's beautiful. And actually listening to other people's type of music, but I always enjoyed my own music. I always enjoyed my own songs. I always enjoyed my own type of expression, and a lot of people find that hard to deal with. They can't deal with that. They find that kooky, which is kind of kooky. I totally agree. But it is fun. No, that's really cool. All right, well, enough. Yeah, let's talk about your show. You had I came on the show. Let's talk about that one first. I came on your show. We had a bunch of anarcho-primitivists on versus some technologists. That was a very fun show. What do you remember about that show? Let's talk about that show. How did you come up with the idea of having that?
I came up with the idea for having that because those are the two movements that I see as, I wouldn't necessarily, yeah, sure, they're in the fringe, might as well say it. They're both fringe movements because there aren't that many people out there that would say that they're a transhumanist. Not a lot of people out there who would say that they're a fan of Uncle Ted Kaczynski. So those are diametrically opposite positions. And I just thought it would be a lot of fun to bring both of them on. And we got Sunny, for the Kaliak people who are listening to this right now. Welcome. We had Sunny and we had Gennady. And Gennady Solyarov II, who was also a frequent guest on your show. And they clashed pretty hard. Like, they had different ways of seeing the world, where I think Sunny's perspective is that if people are living in a certain way, like if we have, let's say, tribesmen living somewhere in a secluded area, there's no reason to introduce technology or these other methods to them. Gennady is upset that they're dying prematurely, according to him, that they live a short life, then they die, and it's a horrible thing that they are dead. Sunny's perspective is much like that quote from Braveheart. Every man. How does that go? Like, every man, not every man truly lives. That's the end of the quote, basically. So the idea being is that, oh yeah, every man dies, not every man truly lives. I think that was the quote. The idea being there that these people who are in this hunter-gatherer lifestyle still, they're engaged with nature. They're engaged with a group consciousness, I think, which is what a very interesting book. 1 second. This one right over here, I'm reading, The Ever-Present Origin by John Gebser. Very interesting book. And it talks about how a lot of these tribal societies, the way that they saw the world was like Mother Nature, and this is my words, not his. Mother Nature was gently taking care of them, like a mother, just like holding them in her arms, where they didn't feel a sense of individuality. Instead, they felt a group consciousness, not themselves as me, but myself as being mass, part of this mass that's like a hive mind, kind of like fingers on a hand, if you will, the hand being the tribe and the fingers being the individuals. And they play the piano of their own tune of the universe, and they live their certain lives and they die. But having this connection at a young age, think of how many of these tribes, and I don't know if it's all of them, but I think a lot of them, they sleep together, where like the mom and the child, they're together for a very long amount of time. While today, we not only have, separate beds, but we put our old people, obviously not not everybody, but so many people in America, I find this horrible. They put their elder relatives in these old people's homes. I think that's disgusting. I think it's disgusting to take away somebody who is like the elder of the family, somebody who's supposed to have the wisdom, who's supposed to guide you. Just take them, just dump them in a home somewhere. And I think it's the destruction of the family. And it's been going on for a long time. The opposite with these tribal societies, where sure, they may not live a long time, but at least they're living together. At least they're living in the kind of state where they can appreciate the act of being alive. The other question, though, is what John Gebser talks about, is that eventually we moved away from that to the ego, where we kind of saw each other as an individual and saw the world that's around us as being separate from us. What he says is that now we're going to go into another state where we are going to be able to see things in, I guess, the fourth dimension, which is time. But we are going to be able to experience life, not just thinking about whatever's going on right now, but being aware of whatever happens and whatever happened. And I may be butchering what he's talking about, but it's kind of like the idea of the ascension of consciousness, the ascension of the ego above this state of being in this hive mind, not really being aware of an external reality, to the state of being aware of an external reality, and then to the state of being over the external reality, where in a way it's kind of like you attain a level of godhood, where you're going to be able to, just, I can't even explain it, because I don't think it can be explained in words. It's like when you read a book. You are experiencing a time, you're experiencing a universe of these individual characters that are in this book that went from the mind of the author, or rather from the mind of the ethereal realm into the mind of the author, into the book. And here you are receiving this information. And in a way, that is you experiencing a universe that's encapsulated in a time, which you also do with movies or TV shows or whatever. Like, you're experiencing time in this way. And I think we're going to be able to experience time in this way. Not everybody, but I think those who are, once again, curious, and like somebody said in the chat over here, those, not the one-eyed people, not the two-eyed people, but the three-eyed people, those whose third eye is going to open up, they're going to be the ones who are going to be able to experience this heightened state of seeing things in time, however that's gonna feel like.
Yeah, I think the human epoch. I think we will open ourselves up to some sort of interdimensional travel. I don't think this is a much of an argument. I think we will crack that at some point. But what the interesting thing is, humans have advanced ourselves through technology and through change to where we are now, and we're still sort of fundamentally the same creature as we were. So, if we were spiritual in a sort of sense back then, and we've, let's say, in Sonny's mind, devolved to the state that we are now, in Gennadi's mind, we've evolved to the state we are now, and we're still the same creature. If we reset ourselves to that spiritual state, won't we just end up in the same place? Isn't this the end point of evolution, or is it because something's gone wrong in our evolutionary trajectory? What's happened? Why have we ended up here, and why are we arguing about what happened back there? What's going on there?
I don't think anything's wrong at all. I think this is the natural course of events. This is the challenge that we as ego beings are contending with right now, where we're seeing all of us as these separate entities while we're all one. But that's nothing, because just being a hippie and saying we're all one, man, it's like, duh, that's not exciting. No, what's exciting to me is being able to realize that while still being able to maintain the chaos of people who don't realize that. Because not everybody is going to realize that. And the people who aren't going to be realizing that, they're not going to be sitting around, smoking weed and taking Molly and just caressing everybody at the rave. What they're going to be doing is they're going to have their swords drawn, and they're going to be, they're going to be the alpha. They're going to be creating Chazes all over the place if people are going to be sitting down, maxing, relaxing, all cool, and all shooting some b-ball outside of the school. You know what I mean? Like, we have to maintain a balance of severity and mercy. And that is the evolutionary challenge right now. Because if we don't, then we're going to be the ones that are going to get stumped. And I don't want to get stumped. I want to get stronger. That's why I've been doing yoga today, like I told you before.
Do you think that humans are eventually going to fade out of existence, that we're going to pass over the baton to technological beings that we create, or ourselves emerge into some sort of technology that looks somewhat post-human? Do you think that this is the end point?
Not at all. First off, this is only one planet, and it's not even on the great part of the galaxy. Like, if you look at the galaxy, or at least the images that I've seen so far, like the CGI images where they think we are in relation to the entire galaxy, center's over here. The edge is over here. We're kind of over here. Or maybe over here. We're not in the greatest place. We're not in the worst place relative to the center. The reason why I'm saying this is I think that there are other worlds out there, as the Hindus refer to them as lokas. There are other, and the Mormons also believe in this too, which I find pretty interesting. There are other planets out there where you would be able to live maybe at a higher level. Like, if you're good on this world, then maybe the next world, maybe that's not going to be heaven. Maybe heaven's just the bonus stage of the astral realm where you can just like play around with whatever stuff you want to, but then eventually where you have to go back into physical reality. If you were at a certain karmic level, I think you'd be able to go to another planet and then another one and then another one, and then Krishna Loka, where you could hang around with Krishna, the purple dude playing the flute with the animals. But anyway, I think that people can hop on from one place to another if this Earth is destroyed, which I hope it won't be anytime soon. But if that happens, that is far from the end, because like I said before, I think that we're all a mind, we're all an imagination, we're all a dream. So if this world is destroyed, people are going to move on to something close to this, but maybe others who have gotten to the point where they would be eligible, or let's say their self, the idea of like this higher being that knows much more than you do, and that's guiding you throughout this experience as this ego being, that the self would want you to maybe experience a worse planet, maybe experience you becoming a martyr, maybe experience you living in absolute hardship, and then maybe experience, living in the lap of luxury somewhere with the Nagas and their beautiful diamonds or whatever, like there's all kinds of scenarios I can envision. But the point to me more is there are places on the earth which are like hell on earth. There are places in the earth where people are aware, like they have a developed sense of ego, and something horrible happens to them. They're on a vacation and they get butchered. That happens too. And I think that even something like factory farms, we were talking about this before in our podcast, that could be, if you subscribe to the idea of reincarnation as one that would go from human to animal, a temporary rest stop, not a rest stop, but a temporary stop where you would be enduring the most inhuman conditions you could possibly imagine as a chicken that's given all these hormones and that's in this ridiculous bulked up shape for the sake of being eaten, and you're living in this cramped cage and it's just a torture. So that could be a version of hell that's not in some metaphysical realm, but that's right here on Earth. So I think that this Earth is an interesting place in that there are various heavens depending on how you were born, and various hells depending on how you were born or whatever karmic repercussions you would have. You could be born in the lap of luxury, but then something horrible will happen to you, and that would also be, let's say, the thing that you have to endure. And the question for me is, not so much about whether we live on this planet or that planet, but what is the experience that you've currently been embodied in teaching you about what are the things that you have to work on yourself, how you react to other people. Do you listen enough? Do you help the poor enough? Do you work on your body enough? Do you work on your mind enough? Those are questions that I think it's like looking at a mirror where all the events that have transpired in your entire life, that's your mirror. That's the mirror that's looking back at you and it's saying, okay, let's look at all these things that have occurred in your life. What can you make out of this? What are the lessons that you can learn from all these experiences? So in that way, like me as an ego being, right now, I am in a relationship with the universe by talking to you, by staring in front of this computer, which is also telling me that I should do exercises on my eyes. I should download the Yoga for Your Eyes DVD set, and I should do exercises so that I don't have to wear these glasses, and that I should probably wear those orange tinted glasses. You know, like that is also a thing that you can ask yourself and get an answer just through observation by looking at this universe as a mirror. So that, I think, is the evolution, you know, and again, when I say evolution, I mean like self-directed willpower to go against the dying of the light type of evolution that some of us are going to be on.
Well, you know, you've mentioned some really interesting points, and obviously reincarnation is something that's an important concept to you. So why the divergence of religions across the world? Why did the Easter Islanders worship one thing and the Aztecs and Mayans worship something else? Why has Jesus made such a profound impact on the religious landscape, and why is Vina and Krishna, you know, this Hindu idea? Why the divergence of religions if there is some sort of universal meaning to reincarnation? You know, because you know the volcano god, the jealous god, as they call him, Yahweh. You know, heaven is a form of reincarnation, and hell is a form of reincarnation in sort of this transference of mind, body, spirit, and consciousness into a sort of dialectic, into a sort of extreme good or an extremely bad. In your analysis with reincarnation, it's not really a level of punishments and carrots and sticks, so to speak, in technical terms. It's more of an experience of consciousness, right? So why the divergence in religions if the universe is trying to yell something out? Is the diversity of religions and religious thought a punishment in itself to keep the conscious mind guessing as to which is right and which is wrong? If you're raised Catholic and you're terrified your whole life of going to hell and you don't explore at all, you demonize the idea of reincarnation and Hinduism and these other foreign things, and you can take this right up to the extreme of the total genocide of the South American population, where the Spanish are just so scared of their own god and their own creature that they genocided cultures into.
By the way, here's an interesting thing about that period of time with the Aztecs. The Aztecs, according again to John Gebser's book, they had certain magic that would work on them, but it wouldn't work on the Spaniards. It had no effect because the Spaniards were in a different, they were in a different ego level.
Well, I remember when the Spanish first arrived, that one of the first things the Aztec Montezuma, or whatever his name was, did was he sent out his magic men. He thought they were gods when they first arrived, so he thought the gods had arrived on the shores, but he sent out his magic men to appease them. And yeah, you're right, it didn't work.
Well, another quick thing about that, and I don't know if this is exact because again, I don't have archaeological evidence that I could dig up right now and show you. But some of the theories around this is that the reason why they thought they were the gods, because they were similar in their form, and like they were tall and all that, like they were similar in their form to the survivors that came to them around 11,000 years ago after the Great Cataclysm, and gave them all of this way of living and they had certain technologies, possibly. I'm very much leaning on the fact that they did, that used the power of sound, the power of vibration, in order to lift heavy stones and to mold them into different shapes. Same thing we could see in Egypt. Same thing we can see in other sites buried right now in various jungles. The reason why I'm mentioning this is I think there were certain things that were lost, but then there were certain things that were adopted by these people, and they were using them for years and years and years to live in relatively the same way. Like if you look at the Egyptian civilization, they were living pretty much the same until, I mean, Akhenaten, he did his thing. But before that, they were living in the same kind of like hive mindset, not as tribes though, not as like animists, but in this other computer structure. If you look at the pyramids from afar, they kind of look like a computer chipboard. So I think that there was something there where they were utilizing certain technologies that now have been completely forgotten about, just to maintain a certain amount of equilibrium while we're passing the time living for all these years. And another thing is that they had very advanced knowledge of the stars. They knew about the precession of the equinoxes. What that is because the Earth is on a tilt and it goes in a wobble. If you stand at a certain site and see a constellation during the equinox, that is a good way to tell galactic time. So it would take, I believe, I'm probably not going to say the right number, maybe 26,000 years to go through the entire zodiac. And I think it goes like backwards. And that is like, why would that be important to them? I think it's important to them because they realize that there are other levels of consciousness above us for whom that is important, who are able to look at life through this four-dimensional perspective, like I talked about.
Okay, so use that as a segue back to the original question. Why the diversity of religions and thoughts if the universe is trying to scream something, or consciousness itself, or the gods, or whatever, is trying to scream some sort of universality? Why the divergence? Why the domination of Muhammad and Jesus and these Asian religions? Why the divergence?
Okay, the reason why I think a lot of these diversions exist, as far as certain animistic cults, if you were to take an animistic cult in Africa versus one of the Aborigines in Australia, for example, you would have different figures, but they would also act in pretty similar ways. You would see certain themes that would reoccur, much like we have the flood myth that is present in Native Americans. I don't know if the Aborigines have that, but what they do have...
Almost every culture does.
Yeah. And by the way, another thing that I don't know if they were the ones who talked about it, but I think the South Americans were the ones, like around the southern part of South America, they were the ones who talked about their ancestors coming here in a ship, sailing west by these survivor people who I mentioned before, who were mistaken to be gods. And they were also the ones who gave them knowledge of the plants, I believe, and a lot of other technological knowledge, so that I believe that if you look at the soil in a lot of these areas before they were colonized, they could grow in abundance in places where the soil would be infertile. So there was knowledge that they were able to get about this stuff. As far as how advanced that knowledge was, does it go all the way back to Atlantis? Maybe. I'm not saying no, but to answer your question, going back to your question once again about the divergence of religions, I don't think there was a divergence. I think that in these animist cults, it's like you're seeing characters based on the things that are in your environment, but it's a two-way relationship between you and these characters, where the gods, who are like abstract principles, would start to get less abstract and less abstract and less abstract the more that they are in contact with either individuals or in these hive mind groups. The gods would present themselves as certain beings that are related to things they know, which is another reason why I think they had that funny looking snake with those horns as one of the hieroglyphics in ancient Egypt. These are things we're just going to put the things and we're going to use that as your language. Same thing with the gods. They're the things This is a stick man. This is a man made out of sticks that Daniel Pinchbeck saw when he was getting high on ibogaine in this African tribal ceremony. He saw a stick man. He didn't see Mary, And speaking of Mary, by the way, there's a very interesting book called Daimonic Reality by Patrick Harper, which talks about these Mary sightings, like the Virgin Mary sightings, and says that a lot of these places where these Christians found the Virgin Mary, they were originally pagan goddess areas where people would see this beautiful goddess. And at first, this goddess didn't address herself as Mary, but eventually said, okay, I'm Mary. Hi, I'm Mary. How are you? Eventually, that's what I'm saying about like this back and forth relationship that goes on with the spectral world and with us as either ego beings or group ego hive mind beings, and the relationship we have to this higher plane of existence.
So therefore, that's a really interesting idea. So the universal consciousness, the universal religion or God or higher being, whatever it is presenting itself in different ways, in different cultural forms to different people around the world, and they're seeing it and relating to it in their own unique ways. But therefore, do you think that some sort of sufficiently advanced technology that humans themselves could create could, kind of like breach that layer, breach that barrier where we could actually step foot into the God world, into the breach? I mean, in a chemical sense, that's what they say when you do DMT. You breach the wall of our existence, as amazing as it is, and you step foot into that world. And if you disrespect it, they also say, if you disrespect it, you can be locked out of the gates. It won't let you in if you disrespect it, and you'll have a quote unquote bad trip every other time. But humans find our way around things. We make fire, we make roofs, we make walls, and we make cool technologies and computers and stuff. Do you think there might be a technological breach into this world where even the gods can't hold back human creativity?
My biggest problem with any reliance upon technology in order to achieve this is that is also a trade-off. You are trading off, I believe, your own personal willpower for ones and zeros to do something for you. I think that the breach doesn't need technology. I think the breach, all that requires is time, various reincarnations, maybe in one go, I don't know, just time, sitting down, meditating, exploring your inner world, communicating with nature, and then I think it's very easy to get to that level. The other question is, when you get to that level, what comes next? Do you have siddhis, for example, which are supernatural magical powers, or whatever you want to call it? Now, whether or not somebody has a siddhi, I don't think that they should tell anybody that they do, because I'm not exactly sure why, but there's a gut feeling that I have, and I've had for a while, that if you have a certain power, if you expose it to the world, it's not right. Keep it to yourself. But with these various powers that I think more people are capable than no, that's not right. They know. I think people know if they have it or not. So if they have the power, I think that they do have the ability to do the things that you're talking about to a certain extent. But as far as whether other people will be able to do the same thing with technology, I don't really know. I can't really say. I think that the willpower aspect means to me that it's going to be very hard. It's only going to be like a very low level attempt, or a copy, like an Archon-like copy of whatever it is that's happening in this world. Because this is also, look at this. This is amazing. We're in three-dimensional reality here. It looks so real. You know what I mean? Like, there's like all these spinning electrons and all this stuff going on, but it's like, it's solid, this is a trip. This is what I was talking about before with Sophia, that we minimize how amazing it is to be in a physical body, because we're so used to the idea of the physical as this dead machine. It's not a dead machine. This is spirituality right here, brother. This is it.
Yeah, and you're totally right. And it doesn't glitch. There's no power issues. You can, it doesn't glitch. You can go outside, and it works quite quite well. I mean, it's your own body that you have to look after in order to make it function. Definitely Legit wrote something really interesting in the comments. He said, what is the Tower of Babel, really? And I like that comment because, you know, that is sort of and this permeates different religious philosophies and religions and warnings from the god, you know, Promethean type ideas, that if we as humans do try and challenge the world of the gods, that we can be led to destruction, or they will inhibit our crusade into trying to either rise above them. And, you know, this is usually something that's very important to the jealous God, or Yahweh, or Jehovah, or God in the Christian sense. He seems like a very authoritarian type, monolithic type creature, type God, that you know, that likes his power, will hold on to his power, and you know, doesn't want to share that power with other beings. You know, it has a monopoly on that. Whereas there are other gods that are more, you know, they're happier to share the power, to distribute the power, to allow people to, you know, there's less routine and less involvement on worship and stuff like this. You know, Christianity is a very confusing beast sometimes. It's a very confusing religion in the fact that there is a lot of worship, there is a lot of devotion, there is a lot of rules and moral sort of convictions that you have to follow in order to please God. In the old sense, the neo-Christians with faith-based religion, especially coming through on the evangelical side, is more about Jesus and just belief in Jesus. But again, even those type of Christians, you start to eat away at the foundations, and you will find the moral codes start to seep through. Where there are other religions and other gods that don't see that that context. And I like that comment there. What is the Tower of Babel? You know, maybe computers could do it. Maybe they could do it. But again, is that the new form of the Tower of Babel, where we're starting to mess with forces and powers that hypothetically lie beyond in the spiritual realm, or we're going to miss lessons that is trying to be conveyed by these gods? Maybe that's cheating. But again, what raises in my head, the question is, hypothetically, we build the Tower of Babel, we build a computer system, a technological system, we draw the energy of the sun to do something, to break into these spiritual worlds. Why create a being of our sophistication in order that could actually potentially crack that dimensional space? Is that like a Frankenstein moment for the gods, or the spiritual entity, or the energy? Is that a Frankenstein type creature that overcame its purpose and rose up in a bad way? Or is that part of the plan? Is that a distressed god, energy, or creature that actually doesn't want to commit to life anymore and is trying to allow us to break into their realm so that it can pass the burden onto us, so that we continue on life either in our own, you know, your consciousness, Lev, it might become God because of a technology that we created, but now you have to be God. And have you ever thought about actually being God in whatever context that means? That actually goes from something powerful and almighty to actually something of a burden, where you are now entrusted with life. You know, the Frankenstein trap, so to speak. Is it a sort of a trap that they've laid out? It's an interesting theorem, and it's one to think about. What do you think about that?
So first, I would like to define Yod-He, Vav-He, the name of God. So if there is, let's say, an earth god, this name that's being applied to this earth god, I would not take it as being the name of this particular earth god, because the name itself, at least my interpretation of it, is that it's just a coded way of explaining the process of creation. You have Yod, which is like the point out of which everything comes. Then you have He, which is the process of emanation. And I believe the Hebrew word letter He, that's what it means, like the process of like emanating something out of something. Vav is like an in-between point, where it can represent a shoot that connects a higher level to a lower level. So I see Vav as being the human being, the receiver. We are kind of like an antenna, right? Like if you just stand straight, you're like a pole with a circle. You know, you're an antenna. So anyway, we're the Vav. We're between heaven and earth, and we are the willpower being that, unlike the jealous gods, like Buddhism talks a lot about this, where they say like the gods and the jealous gods, they don't have a choice to escape this. They're already stuck in this power play that they have. But human beings, they do have a chance to reach nirvana because they're this like fragile being that's not going to get their self overblown with all of this majestic power. But anyway, the last one is also hey, which to me implies the process of creation is now it's our responsibility to say, hey, what can I create or what can I give? Because the process of creation, I see it as the process of giving rather than the process of receiving. Even if you receive certain accolades for things you do, still, when you create something, it's not like you're sitting around just like eating potato chips all day. You know, like you're creating something that you're going to bring forth into the world. Much like when a woman is pregnant with child, you know, she is creating a life, like life is coming out of her. That is like as above, so below example of that same process, which for a lot of people, not just in childbirth, but also just in the act of building something and constructing something in the technology that you were just referencing right now. It's all a part of it. So Yod Hey Vav Hey, whatever earth god that was supposed to represent to the Hebrews, that name itself, I think, and this came to me in like a mid-dream state, I think that it means the process of creation that's present everywhere you happen to go, and it just describes it with these Hebrew letters. But yeah, I think our responsibility is to, in a way, be going to a higher level where we would be able to create. But then the question is, what comes afterwards? According to the Buddhists, it just keeps going up and down and up and down. You're in the majestic gods, jealous gods, then you're in the human form, animal, hungry ghost, demonic creature, then back up to animal, yada yada yada. I don't know, man. It's like at that point, it's like once you've already reached the level of being in four-dimensional reality where you could just think of something and create it, and you could look at all your past lives and just think, yeah, I really screwed up there. I should have kissed her when I had the chance. Anyway, when you look at all your past lives, when you could look at everything that has ever happened on this planet at least, and then you get to another level where you can create, that's all dandy. But the question is, what happens then? Is there another other level above that the Buddhists don't even know about? I don't know. They say that it's just up and down and up and down and just keep going, or you can go into nirvana. I don't know. It's like they're like you tell me, or chat, you tell me. I don't know. This is where I get
Isn't the Sattva or whatever it's called, the person who stays in Nevada the ignorant fool, because they're not supposed to stay in Nevada because they missed the whole point? I mean, they can stay there, but that's kind of like that's a dumb thing to do. You've missed the whole point of what paradise is about. It's literally not about paradise. It's about consciousness, and it's about ascending to some sort of spiritual belief within the context of pain and flesh and blood and bone and desire, and defeating an overwhelming human desire. The Sadi Baba or whatever they call. It's super interesting, Lev. I really like having you on and talking about spiritual context. It's very interesting, and I'm enjoying the chat. I think the chat's it's really on fire, and they're talking about lots of interesting things down there. But anyway, let's just quickly go back to the Gennady. So Gennady and Sonny, they clashed, and there was a point in after the anarcho-primitive one. They had a bit of a fight. What did you think about that? What were you thinking at the time? Were you a bit like, whoa?
Well, I think it's a good balance to have streams where some of them are clash-tastic, other ones are calm and cool. Like we had a really good one on Sunday, and we were just talking and having a good time. There wasn't any clashing. It is kind of like an undulating thing in the way too, like a wave pattern. So the stream of the anarcho-primitivist versus transhumanist, I thought it was a lot of fun. I think that it's fun to have people, like butt each other's heads. And, it's fun. It was nice. But I understand that some people, like, I don't want to speak for Gennady, but I think that there are people out there who are of different generations and don't go for the banter as readily as other people, which is why I think that there may have been a miscommunication as far as what level of banter is this going to be, because this isn't like this nice town hall where you just sit up, drink some tea and you discuss. Sometimes it is like that, but if the energy changes, man, it's like and there is something to that, I think, that's also interesting, where you get like a meeting of completely different worlds who don't really know that much about each other. There is something interesting there too. But I think that it was what it was. It was a meeting of different worlds. They didn't agree with each other, and there were a lot of memes.
That's how we learn. I think that's how we learn, and I think that's actually quite. It's not. Sometimes it's not nice.
By the way, Sonny wanted to issue a correction. Hey, host of the show, I am Sonny. I am not an anarcho-primitivist. I am a futurist.
I don't mind. I don't care what he defines himself as. The context of our conversation was that there was an anarcho-primitivist versus futurist debate. Who was on what side? I don't really mind or care. I didn't say anything about what he was. And in the other talk, the one where they had the fight, I don't even think that was an anarcho-primitivist versus transhumanist debate. And whatever side Sonny wants to be on, I do not mind or care how he defines himself. So. That's fantastic. If you're a futurist, fantastic. Well done. All right. Well, yeah. So I can't. If Lev does join the chat, I can't actually do it because my software crashed again. But we could still stream here anyway. I've got to. I think it's my drivers. Honestly, that's really stuffing it up. But that's all right. All right. Well, let's just plug the show. Let's tell everyone where you can go. I mean, most of these people know already, but for the future people who subscribe and rewatch this, I tell people where they can catch you, because I love the show.
Oh, thank you so much. So you can catch us at Break the Rules, bit.ly/11Jules. It's a great show. It's the most diverse show you could ever hope to see. By diverse, I mean we have so many different people on from so many different walks of life. Like Steele was just saying, we had Gennady, who was a transhumanist, along with a lot of these esoteric Twitter people. And we had a professor of gender studies on with Delicious Tacos, the writer, and with Logo Daedalus. And that was so much fun as well. And it was nice. Like, even though there was a clash of ideas going on, she was all right with it. Like, she didn't answer every single thing, but it was good. Like, she had fun. And even before that, we had an episode with the former deputy chief technologist of NASA, Jim Adams, who was on with Gravantis, that some of you guys know. Gravantis, he is a Orthodox Christian guy who subscribes to Seraphim Rose's idea of these aliens being demons. Now, I see it in a different way, where I think there's like both demons and like higher beings, yada, yada, yada. But anyway, that was a great episode as well. So many of our episodes are just a thrill to do. And we are going to be having Free for All Friday coming up this Friday. We're just going to get a bunch of people together and they're going to talk about whatever they want to talk about. And it's going to be a lot of fun. And then
sounds good. It sounds like an all-out brawl.
Yes,
I like it. That's Free for All Friday. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Free for All Friday. Indeed. And you could find me at LevPo, LEVPO on Twitter. I'm also an animator, by the way. I don't know how many people in the chat know this. I mentioned it to some people, but I do animations. And I want to send you guys some of the animations that I did later on as well, because I want to keep making animations. There's not enough time right now, but I want to keep doing it. It's also a really big passion of mine. But anyway,
yeah, and I think that's like I've known you and Jules for a long time, and I've seen your animations, and that's one of the first ways I actually found you. And you do a fantastic job with that. And keep it up, man. We really, I've always supported you. I always loved you guys. Keep coming on my show. I'll come on your show, and we'll keep it up. I mean, you guys have some really robust, interesting debates, and I really enjoy it, and I really endorse it. And I just keep it up, dude. And Yeah, I got a lot to learn. I mean, I watch your show and I learn a lot all the time, especially about you guys seem to have found a spiritual sort of niche. No, you don't exclusively focus on spirituality, but history spirituality is a big thing, and it makes me look at a lot of read a lot about different religions and gods and religious archetypes and other things as well, because it's just very stimulating, and it's nice to wake up to. So no, you just keep going, dude. Keep it up. You guys are doing a great job. So really thank you for your work and your effort, and just pushing this stuff into the universe. It's really encouraging.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me, Steele. And guys, subscribe to the Archer Report. You're gonna have a lot of great episodes coming up, and I am rooting for you all the way, brother. You're amazing. Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh yeah, this is a new channel. This is a new channel, and we are working. And when I get my software, actually working, the show will get even better. But it keeps crashing on me and everything, so I'll have to fix that. But yeah, subscribe if you like what we do here. You can check out old episodes on Detonation. You can type in Detonation. I'll put a link in or something, and you can check out. There are a lot of episodes there. You can go and have a look through different people, all sorts of different subjects, mainly around economics and politics and technology and the human condition and stuff like that, currency and stuff. So it's really cool. But yeah, we got a lot to talk about.
By the way, the painting, for those who are curious who don't know.
Oh yeah, the painting.
Yes, it's the Mrs. Vickers by John Singer Sargent. So here's the full painting in its full glory. I mean, it's a little bit cropped, but you guys get the idea. And it's reversed. You gotta flip it over to see it in the right way. But very beautiful women behind me. I'm very, very flattered to have these beautiful gals behind me.
Yeah, that's really nice, and I'll have to get my green screen back up here and sit in front of a rocket or something again. I enjoyed that. I think what Elon Musk is doing is very cool. What NASA is planning to do. Let's go to the moon. Let's go to Mars. Let's get out there into the stars. I think this is a great adventure of
Definitely.
human exploration and endeavor, and I think we can do it. I think the Earth still has enough time, enough ecosystem in order to pull us over that we can survive this transition, and hopefully we can like the Mayflower or something, we can settle on new worlds and go off as a species into the stars. I just worry that we're going to take bad systems into the stars, and that's not what I want to see. So that's why we set up the show. Try and generate new and better systems that we can expand humans into space, and we can take these precious brains that are full of consciousness and spirituality in themselves and thinking, cognitive thinking, into the stars, and off we go. So that's really good. Well, I want to thank you heaps, Lev, for coming on. I'm sure everybody's already subscribed to your channel, so make sure you go and do that. It's really exciting, and I'm going to watch Free for All Friday. I'm excited. I'm super excited.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much for having me on. Well, thank you for having me on. There's nobody there unless there's a ghost behind you. Okay. All right.
Yeah, thanks to the beautiful women for coming along, the painting and all that. No, that's great.
They're great. They're great. Yeah.
I have to figure out how to turn the stream off because, as I said, the software's broken, so I have to figure out how to do that. But anyway, that's the Archer Report. Thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing Lev as well as soon as we can. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.